بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. First of all, I would like to apologize to everyone for last Friday for the miscommunication as I was traveling, and I take full responsibility for that miscommunication. I apologize that I inconvenienced people. Some people came to the mosque, and many of you are online. So my apologies for that. But today's session and the next two Friday sessions, inshallah, will be online. Okay, there are quite a few questions, so we'll jump right in, inshallah. Eating non-halal meat on ready-made eateries, is it permissible or not permissible? So the issue of eating meats and chickens that is not certified dhabiha, as I've mentioned in the past, the overwhelming majority of the ulama say that the meat has to be slaughtered according to the Sharia, and that in addition to that involving or including the permissibility of eating kosher food, there is a dissenting opinion, there is a minor opinion that says that as long as a person of the book, a Jew or a Christian, eats this food, then that would make that food permissible. Now, I've mentioned that before, that the issue with eating halal food is that it relates to our dua being accepted. So this is not an issue in which one should take a dissenting opinion lightly. And this is one of those issues where it's much, much better to be more cautious. Therefore, my answer is that no, it would not be permissible. Unless there is extenuating circumstances or something like that. Somebody is traveling and they have no access to any other alternative. There's no, they need some sort of protein and there's no fish option and so on and so forth. In that case, okay, if it's like a one-off thing and one wants to follow the other opinion, okay, because the other opinion is there. However, as an ongoing issue, I would say absolutely, you should make the effort to make sure that the food is halal because it impacts your dua being answered. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Atib mat'amak takun mustajab ad-du'a." Make sure that what you consume is halal, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept your dua. And if I'm not mistaken, either in the last class or the last Friday class or the Friday before it, we talked about this hadith in Sahih. We talked about this hadith in the 40 collection of Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah. So for us living where we live, we should make the effort to find certified dhabiha and or kosher. This brings up another issue. I'm not sure if somebody asked this here or elsewhere, but the tasmiyah, that somebody saying Bismillah or Allahu Akbar in the act of slaughtering, amongst the four Sunni schools of law is a matter of debate. So it's not a necessity. In the Hanafi school, it's a condition for the dhabiha to be halal. For the other schools, it's not. So that's why we're therefore allowed to eat kosher meats. And in this case, that is something, that burden is not something that is obligatory. What matters is that the animal is actually slaughtered, that the blood is drained, so on and so forth. So that's why we are allowed to eat kosher meats and chicken. And as I've mentioned before, it's available, readily available in our area, Costco, other places, halal markets. It's not an issue. Okay. How to address the feeling of urine leak in your garment well after washing, cleaning, and you're about to pray, and you're in the midst of prayer. Well, this could be an issue of waswas. So unless there's actual evidence that there's something wet, short of that, don't listen, don't give in to that type of feeling, because that can create a larger problem down the road with following some type, whisperings. The same type of issue happens a lot of times when people make wudu and they think, oh, I didn't wash this part of the body and I think I have to go back, and they get into this downward cycle. The issue of urine on the body, etc., is something physical. So unless if there's physical evidence, that's what we follow. We don't follow necessarily I feel. And with in absence of that physical evidence, then we are in no need to repeat the prayer or to repeat the wudu. It was reciting extra du'as or recitals during obligatory prayer permissible, especially when you're praying not in a congregation or at home. Well, it's not only permissible, it's the practice, right? It's what the Prophet ﷺ did. The Prophet ﷺ told us to increase our dua when we are in sujood, because this is the closest we are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the prayer is the time to make the dua, especially at the time of sujood. Also, many people don't know this, but when you're sitting in the tashahhud and you finish the tashahhud and the salatul ibrahimiyya at the end of the prayer, before you say assalamu alaikum wa assalamu alaikum, but before you do your salam, at that moment there is an accepted dua. So sometimes some people will prolong that last sitting to accommodate and facilitate the reading of dua. When we pray Fajr prayer in some of the madahib, there's the dua qunut, which is also a sunnah for the Malikis and the Shafi'is. In time of crises, we also make dua qunut at the last rak'ah of a prayer, so on and so forth. So no, the dua in the prayer, that's part of that's what the prayer is made for. It's something that is encouraged. Excretion of najis from one's private parts breaks the ablution. I know this includes urine and passing air. Is it permissible to hold the air being expelled during the entire prayer? It's considered disliked, makruh, to hold either the sensation of having to use the bathroom or to pass wind in order to pray. It's considered disliked, but not haram. The optimal way is to relieve yourself before you pray, make wudu, and pray comfortably. But sometimes, the situation, you have to do that, and in which case it's just simply disliked. Okay, I don't know, maybe this is part of the previous question, but in congregation, if I left, it will disturb others. What should I do? If you're in the congregation prayer and you have a feeling that you need to use the bathroom, or including passing wind, and it's not, not to get too graphic, but you're able, it's not like you're not going to explode with that sensation, then you can hold yourself and continue the prayer. Because if you're in our masjid, like if you're in the far end, by the office praying, or if you're in the women's section, you're like in that little glass room all the way to the far end, it's going to be very disturbing and awkward to leave all of that and walk across a prayer hall to the bathroom. I understand that. So sometimes it's just easier to hold it in. There's nothing wrong with that. If, however, you have a sensation that that's all you're thinking about, you're like dying, no, in that case, I would say leave the prayer, walk across the prayer hall to the bathrooms, relieve yourself, make it, and come back. Okay. Last month during the Halaqah series regarding the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi, you mentioned that Muslims selling alcohol to non-Muslims in a Muslim country is permissible in the Hanafi school. That same night you covered the hadith about shame, that if you feel shame doing an act, then you shouldn't do it. So this is quite a long question, so let me just take the time to read it all out of respect. Given that many Muslims who do sell alcohol in the US often sell alcohol in corner stores or gas stations in inner cities and are directly contributing to the deterioration of other Black and brown communities, shouldn't this knowledge itself be enough to prevent Muslims from selling alcohol, especially in these communities? What's worse is many non-Muslims are well aware that Muslims aren't supposed to consume alcohol, and this resentment shows up between our communities. The idea that you'll sell something that causes disease addiction to our children, but don't permit it to your own kids. If we're truly working towards solidarity with our neighbors and are trying to be good neighbors, you mentioned this at a previous halaqah, why would we want to give something harmful to our neighbors that we don't permit for ourselves? The existence of something that is permissible in the Sharia does not equate that that thing is doable. And what the way we say it is ليس كل مباح متاح. Not everything that is permissible is doable. It's permissible for a man to marry more than one woman, but in most cases it's not doable, and in most cases it creates problems. How can something that's permissible create a problem? Well, that's the nature of life. The Sharia, one of my professors, Professor Sayyid Hussein Nasr, he used to always tell us this, he would summarize this kind of sentiment beautifully, and he would say that Islam has come to deal with the reality of the human condition. In other words, the Sharia is not necessarily here to create an ideal situation, the ideal system of justice, and that ideal world that will be in the afterlife. But because we are human and we have our idiosyncrasies and we have our weaknesses, so on and so forth, the Sharia has come to regulate that. And that's why you will find things in the Sharia that are permissible, but maybe in many circumstances not doable. The way the person that wrote this question asked this question, you are painting a narrative that's not doable. I would never say, if somebody came to me and said, should I open a liquor store in an underprivileged neighborhood selling to underage guys, I would say, no, of course not, you shouldn't do that. But the ruling that I shared with the permissibility of selling alcohol in non-Muslim land, for Muslims selling alcohol, or other things that would be deemed impermissible to sell, including pig and pork products, etc., in non-Muslim lands, shows the flexibility of the Sharia in adapting to certain living conditions for Muslim minority communities. So another narrative is that somebody has a restaurant. Another narrative is that somebody has a grocery store, not in an underprivileged area, so on and so forth. I am aware that in parts of America there are this exact scenario, Muslims that own liquor stores in underprivileged areas, in which case I would say, try not to do that, or try to get out of that, or try to expand, because there is also another element, which is the element that you mentioned, is that there is the disproportionate harm that is done to, in this case, African American, community. The fact of the matter is that the vast majority of Americans, or in any Western country, consume alcohol. It is considered part of the culture, part and parcel of the culture. There's no stigma to it. It's legal. In some religions, it's part of liturgy, in which they take Eucharist, and it's obviously a little bit of wine, but it's wine for us. If that's haram, nonetheless, a small amount, a large amount is haram to consume, so on and so forth. So, in the Hanafi understanding, this is something that there is no haramness attached to it for the non-Muslim. So there's no prevention, therefore, of selling it in that context. But Imam Abu Hanifa is not saying go and sell it to people that are being addicted, that are underprivileged, so on and so forth. So when you hear me say things like that, you have to also understand that this is a ruling of the Sharia. This is not necessarily endorsing the act itself or a certain manifestation of the act. Actually, it's very funny. I don't know if I shared this last class or not, but I very recently, right before I left, I was dealing with a situation. A sister reached out to me in another state, and one of the issues was that her husband or her husband's family own a convenience store that sells alcohol, and the husband just sort of grew up in that environment, not a liquor store, but a grocery store. So these things happen. It happens not just in North America, it happens throughout Europe, Muslim minority communities in European nations, etc. So one must make sure that there's that distinction. I work in the bank 8 to 5, and I have no lunch break, except that I eat while I work at my desk and have 10 minutes to spare. I miss Dhuhr and Asr and Jummah on Fridays. What should I do? I am seated in an open public place and have no space to pray. Can I simply sit at a desk or another chair and pray quickly seated, although I am in no way handicapped? Can I combine Dhuhr and Asr and pray? You have said yes before for no reason, even if I'm not traveling. So the issue with this question is that it depends on what time of the year we're talking. If we're in the summer months, 8 to 5 would still allow you to leave work at 5 and catch Dhuhr and Asr. Combining the prayers, no problem. You can combine Dhuhr and Asr in either of the times. Continually while you work, praying 4 and 4 rak'ahs back to back. There's nothing wrong with that. So if it's in the summer month, or let's say it's in a month in which Maghrib comes in past 5 p.m., then you can catch the prayer after work, both Dhuhr and Asr. The problem is what you're going to have is when you are in the depths of, I think it's maybe like December and January. I'm not entirely, maybe that's not entirely accurate, but when I think Maghrib maybe in our area might even be as early as 4:50-ish, 4:55, something like that. In that case, you're going to have to excuse yourself from work and pray the 4 and 4 in a back office or outside somewhere. You'll have to make that effort. You can't pray sitting down when you are physically able to stand. Again, they can be quick 8 rak'ahs. It need not take more than 5 minutes. You can recite just the Fatiha in every rak'ah, not reciting a second surah afterwards at the first 2 rak'ahs to make the prayer shorter. I mean, there are ways to accommodate that, but combine the prayers, absolutely. And missing Jummah is excusable because there's a reason, because you are at work, but you must make the effort in the days in which, and they're only going to be a minority of the months, in which the days in which the Maghrib is going to be very early. That being said, as Americans and in the American workplace, by law, you have the right to have that accommodated. So you should also feel a little bit of strength in being able to self-advocate with respect, but this is something that's going to take no more than 5 minutes. Okay. We have prevented our young son from eating from the school cafeteria or from McDonald's, as the food may not be halal, and he is obliged. God bless him. But is this fair, as we live in a country which is largely Christian and are believers? Well, first of all, acknowledge the decision that you've taken, and may Allah Ta'ala protect your son and all of our children. And not only it's not an issue about fair, it creates character. I think it was just today, earlier today, they're talking about, I think the U.S. National Coast Guard, more people are leaving than are being recruited. I think the Pentagon last month was talking about the difficulty in finding enough recruits to keep a certain amount of quota in our armed forces. And all of this is indicative of the changing priority that young people have, a changing understanding, a level of non-commitment, so on and so forth. But being able to go somewhere and having the self-discipline to say no, to have the self-discipline to keep your prayer, to have the self-discipline to keep a halal diet. This is a great gift that you have given your son. It's quite the opposite, because complacency, laziness, weakness of character is something that abounds and it surrounds us, and we have an obligation, to try to teach our children to be stronger than that. So I wouldn't look at it as an issue. I wouldn't look at it as an issue of fair or not fair, but rather I would look at it as an issue, as a teaching moment that you are giving your child the gift of self-restraint. Because there will be reasons and other aspects of life in which to exercise that self-restraint as they grow older, as they enter into the workforce, as they have their own children, own families of their own. So it's not just the issue of like, oh, everyone gets to eat McDonald's and I can't eat McDonald's. First of all, we have more than enough alternatives. I mean, I don't find a problem with that. I mean, we eat comfortably all the time, alhamdulillah. In all of our functions at the masjid, the food that we procure. I mean, the one thing that the interfaith community always comments on is how good the food is that we always have at ICCP. So obviously it abounds, the options are there. So don't look at it as from that vantage point, look at it from another vantage point about character and strength and fortitude. We get our meat from a butchery, from a farm, which has a conveyor belt for slaughter and a voice recording, or a person present recites Allahu Akbar. What is your take? This is permissible. And in the Muslim majority world, that's what they do to accommodate all of the fiqhi opinions. So that's fine. Regarding home mortgages and vehicle leases, you have said it before that as long as there is an asset between me and the financier, this transaction is permissible. Can you repeat the opinion, please, as I have requested others to listen to your opinion today? So we'll just assume that these other people are somewhere out there listening in, and the issue with this question is that the modern fiqhi understanding of these financial transactions is that as long as there is an asset, a tangible, a car, appliances, furniture, a house, land, etc., that this is not an issue of borrowing money in exchange for some kind of benefit, which is one of the categories of the riba transaction, but rather that this is a finance tamwil, this is a finance transaction, and that extra amount or that interest is not considered riba. Now, this has a lot to do with also the changing nature of money itself, because money, fiat currency, paper money, is no longer backed by gold and silver. The Shafi'is, the later Shafi'i school, the later jurists of the Shafi'i madhab say that there is no riba in money that is not backed by gold and silver, because Imam Shafi'i limited the understanding of riba to be something that is intrinsically part of gold and silver only, not on the concept of money, but on gold and silver. So were gold and silver to be used for money, or were gold and silver used to back a currency, then such a transaction would not be permissible. But because that tie has been severed, for two or three generations now, ever since the 1970s, globally, then that allows this reinterpretation of that type of transaction to be a transaction of finance and therefore permissible. This is the official position of the Dar al-Ifta, the National Fatwa Office of Egypt, of which I'm a part of, and this is what I gave as a sort of a shortened version of the reason behind it. If I get interest in my checking and savings account and I give it away without using it for consumption myself, will this be considered sadaqah in Allah's eyes? Of course, this is considered sadaqah. Maybe the questioner is also assuming that interest is riba or haram. And just as I said in the previous question, that is not considered riba. That interest is a return on the investment of the money. So if you kept it, it would also be fine. To donate that amount is a sadaqah, of course. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to bless us for our donations and our giving. I have arthritis, and a cream which has marijuana as a base has been recommended by my masseur for rubbing on my skin. Is it permissible from an Islamic point of view? If it helps, of course it's permissible, because the substance of the marijuana is considered pure because it's a plant. So if you put that, on your skin, that's not considered putting any najasa on your skin, and therefore you could pray and do the things that you need to do. If it makes you high, that's another question, which would, of course, the Sharia is very liberal when it comes to medicine, and if there is something that that is, there are more potent things that we take for, pain medicine, for example. There are narcotics that we take, oxycodone and things like that. I mean, that actually makes you very high, and they're very addictive, but sometimes the pain that you have requires that. And of course, that would be permissible in the Sharia. So in this case, yeah, that's fine. This is a very minor usage of the marijuana. In Morocco, the government has permitted growing and exporting marijuana. Sometimes I love the questions you guys send me. Sometimes I shudder when I read the questions, but today it's been very enjoyable so far. In Morocco, the government has permitted the growing and export of marijuana. Would you know on what basis they made this decision? I have no idea about the details of this. If I were a guessing man, I would say it has something to do with economics. The hope that it would raise money. So I don't know enough of the the marijuana industry in Morocco to give you an informed opinion. Um, I mean, drugs obviously it goes without saying are haram to consume. The problem with drugs in the Sharia is that in the case, for example, of marijuana, which is a plant that we know, is that the plant itself, the substance, is a pure substance. It's tahir, it's pure. Like if I had a marijuana plant, in my shirt pocket, I would be able to pray. It's not, it's not just like if I had tobacco, in my shirt pocket, I could stand and pray because the tobacco as a substance is pure. The consumption of these things, however, is a different story because of the effect it makes on the body. So because of that distinction in the Sharia, I think that's where sometimes people try to play like this, oh, well, we're growing it for medical purposes. Okay, well, if it's for medical purposes, legitimate medical purposes, then okay, that would be permissible, of course. Because the medicine that we take has all sorts of stuff in it. And that stuff has to come from somewhere. But my experience, which is limited, but I do have some experience and some insight into the idea of growing marijuana. It's not that I've grown marijuana. I mean, I've looked into it and talked to people, etc. Is that it's largely an excuse for people to want to get high, and I mean that with all seriousness. In other words, there is medical marijuana. There is medical applications for marijuana. There might be transformative medical applications for marijuana. But I have found that the people that claim that they want to do that, they're not really doing that. And it's really just sort of smoke and mirrors. So I would look at this as very dubious, is what I'm saying. Whereas mushrooms and psilocybin, ayahuasca, and these other type of psychedelics, there is a growing movement in the medical community to use these type of medicines in a controlled way to deal with various disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, people, war veterans, etc. Now I find that aspect to be more serious than the marijuana aspect. But as for the Morocco thing, I just don't have I'll have to look into it, and maybe the next time we do this session, I'll have something more. Is it worth reading the Quran if you don't understand the meaning? Does one get ajr by doing so in Allah's name? This often goes through my mind. I do try to read with meaning, but most often I like reading the Quran for Allah's sake. I feel good in my own way. Of course, the Quran it's magical, right? Every aspect of the Quran is rewarded. Your eyes are rewarded by simply looking at the Quran, which is why many people decorate their houses with, like Ayat al-Kursi or something like that, because even looking at the script of the Quran is a reward. Holding the Quran is a reward. So reading the Quran, meaning audibly saying the verses, such as that your eyes are seeing, your mouth is reciting, your ears are hearing, that's all multiple rewards. Now, if you did that and you understood it, that would be another added reward. So this either or, black or white, this is one of the problems of the modern mindset. This is not the Islamic mindset. The mindset of Islam is yes and. Yeah, do that and try to meaning. But I can't with meaning. Okay, but still read the Quran. As a rule, and this is a first principle of Islam, never do anything or never engage in anything that will sever your relationship with the Quran. Bottom line. Because this is one of Shaitan's ploys, is to try to separate you. oh, I really don't understand it, so I'm not gonna. So what ends up happening with that mindset is you end up not reading or understanding the Quran at all. You just like it becomes something that's too distant. You just put it there on the high level of your shelf, wrapped in very nice wrapping, you respect it, but you never open it. Don't do that. That's the what the Prophet ﷺ said is that the Quran will can be testify for us or against us Yawm al-Qiyamah, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, may the Quran testify for us. So don't allow yourself to ever be distant from the Quran. Hold it, read it, listen to it, with meaning, without meaning, keep going. And the more you do it, the more you will gain, inshallah. When one is doing salah, can one recite 2 or 3 short surahs for each rak'ah? Do these surahs have to be in the same order as it appears in the Quran? Okay, so it is a sunnah to recite part of the Quran after the first 2 rak'ahs of every prayer. So both rak'ahs of Fajr, of course, and rak'ah 1 and 2 of all of the other prayers. You can recite 2 surahs. You could recite Qul Huwallahu Ahad followed by Qul A'udhu bi Rabbil Falaq in one rak'ah, and then do ruku'ah and continue. Or you can recite 1 surah, or you can recite no surah because it's a sunnah. Do those surahs have to be back to back? Like let's say Allahu Akbar, I recite the Fatiha wa ad-Dallin Amin. And then I say, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Qul Huwallahu Ahad, Allahu Samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad. And I finish the surah. And then I go and I say, Lillahi ma fi as-samawati wa ma fi al-ard. Man dhal ladhi yashfa'u 'indahu ولله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إذن الذي يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء وسع. I go and I recite an earlier part of the Quran. And they're not in order. There's nothing wrong with that. The custom is that what you recite in the prayer, that one follows the other. But it's not an obligation. You could recite a surah from here and then finish. Or it could even be different than that. Allahu Akbar. And then I finish it, the Fatiha wa ad-Dallin Amin. إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات كانت لهم جنات الفردوس نزلا خالدين فيها لا يبغون عنها حولا ولو كان البحر مدادا لكلمات ربي لنفد البحر قبل أن تنفد كلمات. The last verses of Surah Al-Kahf, and I finish that, and then I go back. In this case, I recited the last 3 or 4 verses of Surah Al-Kahf. Then I go back. Etc. The beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah. Nothing is wrong with that. It's just the custom is that they would follow, that I would recite the verses from Al-Baqarah first, then the verses from Surah Al-Kahf. What is not permissible is that I recite the ayat in reverse order. So instead of reciting the last 3 verses of Surah Al-Kahf, I recite the last verse and then come back and recite the verse before that, etc. That's what's not permitted. But do the surahs have to be in order? No. Do the recitation pieces that you choose to recite have to be in order? No. This brings up another question. What happens if you accidentally recite an extra surah in rak'ah 3 or 4? It's fine. There's no prohibition against that, but that's not the sunnah. And that's another common question that some people have, etc. Okay, next question. Is it okay to recite small surahs during the 5-time prayers? When in the masjid I hear them reciting long surahs, does it matter? I notice when you are there, you recite small surahs, and that makes me happy. So I know that I'm on the right track because it is necessary to learn. It is I think not necessary to learn the long surahs. I'm not an Arabic speaking and find it hard to memorize as well, even though I keep trying, inshallah. The sunnah is to make the prayer short if the prayer is in congregation. And in the school of Imam Malik, rahimahullah, it is recommended that the Imam read from the very last section of the Quran, the last eighth of the final juz, which is why it's very common in areas in which the Maliki madhab is dominant. You will find the Imam of the prayer usually reading short surahs. In addition to, it's disliked in the Maliki madhab to recite only part of the Quran. In other words, the sunnah for Imam Malik is to recite a whole surah. Well, obviously you're not going to recite all of Surah Al-Baqarah. So therefore you're going to recite, from Surah Al-Duha, to the end of the Mus'haf. So this is the practice that I have, as you mentioned, I do myself, and it's the practice of all of my teachers. And the only exception to that practice is when we're praying behind somebody who is known for their exceptional recitation, or obviously in the month of Ramadan, but in regular prayer, somebody who's known for their exceptional recitation, memorization, and mastery of the different recitals, the different mode, the different qira'at. In which case, like al-Azhar or something like that, yeah, it is typical that the recitation would be longer because that person is known as a teacher, and this mosque is a teaching mosque. The Azhar is a teaching school, and that would be the exception. But even still, the recitation wouldn't be too long. In addition, there is a sunnah of reciting the same, surah. What some of the companions complained about a companion who read Surah Al-Ikhlas in every prayer. So the Prophet ﷺ asked them, well, why don't you ask him why he does that? So they asked him, why do you always recite Surah Qul Huwallahu Ahad? And he says, well, it's the testification of Allah's oneness, and I love to recite that. And when the Prophet ﷺ heard that, he said, inform him that Allah Ta'ala loves him. So actually, one of my teachers, every prayer he recites, almost every prayer I've ever prayed behind him, except maybe for Fajr prayer, he recites Wal Asr and Surah Al-Ikhlas. And if you've noticed, that's a practice that I do as well. I tend to stick to the same surahs. For that reason, for that hadith, as well as it's a sunnah to make the prayer short and sweet, as I like to say. What's the point of prolonging the prayer when people are distracted, when people don't understand, women have children, people are older, so on and so forth. So that's a little bit about that. Okay. During witr prayers, I do get up all 3 times, unlike Maghrib prayer, meaning that they don't sit for the tashahhud at the second rak'ah. Also on the third rak'ah, they said that I must recite a surah after Surah Al-Fatiha. Is this correct? For the longest time, I just recited the Fatiha on the third rak'ah, but they said that this was not correct, that I should recite another surah after the Fatiha. Please clarify. So this is one of the ways of praying witr prayer. My understanding is that there's no surah read after that third rak'ah. So this, unfortunately, is something that I will need to verify and get back. I did not. I need to consult the Hanafi sources and get back on this question. I apologize. In either case, it's a minor point because the prayer is valid either way. The Sunnah prayers. Was the Sunnah prayers introduced by the Prophet ﷺ? Can you narrate a little more about this? Of course, that's why they're called Sunnah prayers. So they're called Sunnah al-Rawatib, the Sunnahs that the Prophet ﷺ stuck with, the Sunnah al-Qabliyya and Ba'diyya, the Sunnah before the Fard prayers and after the Fard prayers, the 2 rak'ahs before Fajr, the 4 rak'ahs before Dhuhr, the 2 rak'ahs after Dhuhr, the 2 rak'ahs before Asr, the 2 rak'ahs after Maghrib. So that's it. That's Fajr is 2, and then the 6 of those, that's 8, 2 of us, 10, Maghrib, 11, 12. Sorry, the 4 rak'ahs before Dhuhr and the 4 rak'ahs after Dhuhr, so there's 8 there, plus the first 2 of Fajr, that's 10, 10, and then the 2 rak'ahs before Asr, 12, 2 rak'ahs after Maghrib, 14, and then 2 rak'ahs after Isha, 16 plus 1 rak'ah of witr is the minimum witr is 17. So the sunnahs, rawatib in the Shafi'i madhab are the 17 extra rak'ahs in addition to the 17 fard rak'ahs. That's how it's easy to remember. And then there are other prayers that are also sunnahs, like the duha prayer, which takes place after the sun rises before salat al-dhuhr, and the qiyam prayer, so on and so on. All of those prayers, they're all things that the Prophet ﷺ did and are meritorious, and out of our love and respect for him, we follow as much as we can. Was the Prophet ﷺ asked not to preach the religion to others, but to spread the Quran to the people so they can learn from the Quran and follow the Quran? Converting people to Islam by preaching the religion is prohibited in Islam. Is this correct? Please clarify. So I think this is an issue in which there is a problem with language, because people in Arabic, or in Islam, the language of Islam, let's say, we talk about da'wah, which we understand as inviting people or sharing about our faith with other people, which gets assumed in the Western mindset as the same as proselytizing, which is actually going to try to convert people. My argument is that Islam is not a proselytizing religion in the Western sense, and that because simply for the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who has given himself only the power of conversion. لا تهدي من أحببت ولكن الله يهدي من يشاء. Allah ta'ala is the one who guides whom he wills, not us. So therefore, there is no human agency in conversion. You can't make somebody convert. So this idea of Islam being a proselytizing, I think is a gross misunderstanding of the concept of da'wah. Our way is the way of clarity, al-bayan. We are here to share. We are here to openly invite people to learn if they want. But if they don't want to learn, then don't learn. وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. Whoever wants, let them believe, and whoever wants, let them not believe. Doesn't make a difference to us, because that's between you and your Lord. Yawm al-Qiyamah, you'll have to face Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You want to learn about Islam, we're here to teach it to you. So we're not here to impose, we're not here to convert, we're not here to coerce, we're not here to force, we're here simply to share. But we will be public and we will be clear about what we believe in and about what we stand for, so on and so forth. So I'm against this idea of da'wah being like, I'm going to go door to door and have you heard the good word and things like that. I don't think that that's what is meant by da'wah. Furthermore, there's another problem, which is that most Muslims are the ones that need the da'wah today, not non-Muslims. We are the ones that need to remind ourselves of what our faith teaches us, so that we can live up to it, so we can practice it. That's where the effort needs to happen, quite frankly. So that's another issue. Okay, I'm a senior. I keep passing urine and wear Pampers. I am not fit enough to make wudu every time. I like to pray, and I do, and I visit the mosque too for congregational prayer. I do so after taking wudu, but is my prayer valid as I keep passing urine in my Pampers? Yeah, this is called salas al-bawl, and in the fiqh. And if you reach this stage, then it is simply enough, as long as you've protected, yourself, by wearing something secure. That you just simply make wudu, and then you just continue to pray, regardless of what happens. Inshallah, your wudu is valid, your prayer is valid. Before we jumped into this actual session, there was a question about organ donation. So the issue about organ donation is that the majority of fiqh bodies have approved organ donation. I'm a little bit more conservative when it comes to organ donation, because the Sharia definition of death is not necessarily the same as the medical clinical definition of death. And therefore, there could be a situation in which the organs are harvested from the body or taken from the body, while the Sharia says that this person is still alive. And then therefore, the act of taking those organs will in effect cause the death of the person. Now, I know that this is a very minute point, but I personally am not an organ donor, and I'm not ashamed to say that. And this is, what I teach my children and my family. I also acknowledge that the majority of fiqh bodies that are composed of people that are smarter than me and more knowledgeable than me allow it. But I'm more conservative. I'll just leave it at that. Everyone has to make an informed decision. Now, if somebody came to me and told me I'm an organ donor, I wouldn't chastise them, because it's an issue in which clearly many fiqh bodies are allowing it for a host of reasons. But if you ask me my personal opinion, what I personally follow, my personal practice, yeah, I'm not an organ donor. Okay, there are a couple of questions on the chat. What is your opinion about the controversy in the UK and Imam gave a memorial service to the Queen and people saying save the king in the mosque? Well, I mean, they're subjects of the crown. If you're in the UK, or actually technically if you're in a Commonwealth country, then you are a subject of the crown. Of course, a citizen of the country, but you're a subject nonetheless. And part of us being Muslims is having allegiance to the head of state. Just like the Sahaba did when they went to Abyssinia and they fought with the Najashi and his army. And at that time, we have no evidence that the Najashi had converted. His conversion would come later. And furthermore, there was a Najashi after that Najashi died, rahimahullah, and that second Najashi wasn't Muslim. And the Sahaba continued to live there and serve the state, so on and so forth. So the argument that, oh, well, he was a Christian, he was really a Muslim, I mean, it doesn't really, because I don't know, for some reason, some people, they try to argue that. It doesn't matter. From that point of view, if you're a Muslim in the UK, yeah, God save the king, because that's the stability of the nation, the head of state, so on and so forth. If I'm not mistaken, it's also the anthem of the country. So it's also, part of that. There's something wrong in the public for some reason about Muslims being law-abiding people, Muslims supporting the state. I don't know what it is. It's like people get a nervous reaction. And this issue is one of the largest, in my opinion, one of the largest issues that we're facing today. It's almost as if people don't want us to be law-abiding and are arguing that we should not. How could you, astaghfirullah, how could you say, God save the king? Well, think about the implications of what you're saying. Immediately after the Queen's death was announced, immediately in Parliament, all of them, from the Prime Minister down, they all had to swear an oath of allegiance to the new monarch. That's why I spent so many hours watching this stuff, because it was so intriguing. But that's exactly the oath, the bay'ah. That's the oath of allegiance that we have in our own faith tradition. It's actually one of the most Islamic things when you think about it, is that there has to be that type of allegiance. And when we were kids in school, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible with liberty and justice for all. That's a pledge. Are you saying that you don't have allegiance to your state, to your government at the highest level? That's a problem, because that's not an Islamic, and having allegiance is an Islamic ideal. So, I can see why it's odd. For decades, no one's saying God save the king in the mosque, and all of a sudden this thing happened. But it's a sign of faith. It's a sign of patriotism. Muslims are patriotic people, so on and so forth. So, don't see anything wrong with that. I think it's just sort of in the natural course of things. Is it allowed to pray if we see spotting after the period? Not if your period is within 15 days. So the longest length of a menstrual cycle in the Sharia is 15 days. So let's say you have your period, your cycle for 3 days, and you feel like it's over, and you make ghusl, and you resume prayer, and then 2 prayers later, you see spotting. Well, the period was only 3 days, so therefore that spotting is added to those 3 days as a cycle. So no, you would stop praying until the blood ceases completely. Once you get to 15 days, say you're spotting on and off for 15 days. 1 minute after those 15 days, the Sharia says that that blood that appears is not the blood from the womb, but blood from elsewhere in the body. Therefore, you make your ghusl, you clean yourself, and you resume, even if there's spotting after that. It's called istihada in the Sharia. How long do we have to wait to start praying if we have a prolonged period? Okay, I just didn't say that. What is considered halal meat? Can we eat meat by the people of the book? You can eat meat from the people of the book, the Jews and the Christians, if the meat is slaughtered. Allah says the foods of the people of the book is permissible for you, and your food is permissible for them. And that was sort of, we talked about that at length in the beginning of the session. Can someone do tayammum instead of wudu because of laziness? No, there has to be an absence of water, or an absence or an inability to use the water for the tayammum to take place. إن كنتم مرضى أو على سفر أو جاء أحد منكم من الغائط أو لامستم النساء فلم تجدوا ماء فتيمموا صعيدا طيبا. So if you're traveling, or if you're sick, if you're in a state of janaba and you don't find water, then perform the tayammum, Allah says. So there has to be that condition that there's the absence of water, or I'm sick and I can't use the water because I'm just too sick, then I can make tayammum. Or there is water, but there's only enough for us to drink, not for us to also make wudu, then I can make tayammum, etc. Is organ donation? Oh, we got the organ donation. Are tampons permissible? I believe that tampons are permissible, inshallah. One of the Hindu leaders died in my home state this week. In India, this leader supported Muslims many times, so people posted Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. But our local Imam, who is not a mufti, suggested that we should not recite Inna lillahi for non-Muslims. What is your opinion? Wa inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un is a reminder of death. So it's not praying for the deceased, it's you remembering death. So, and any calamity, وَإِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ قَالُوا إِنَّ لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّ إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. Allah says, and when a calamity performs them, when a calamity befalls them, they say to Allah, we belong, and to Him we return. So no, there's nothing wrong with saying. The issue would have been if we start making dua, Allah forgive him, the dua that we do for like the deceased. That's where the issue or the controversy is. But my neighbor died. John died. What happened? Subhanallah. John could have been Muslim, but you know what I'm saying. So there's nothing wrong with that, because that's a reminder of death. Can we use perfume that has, Can we use perfume that has alcohol? I thought we had this question last time, but yes, because the alcohol that's used in the perfume is not meant for consumption. So some of the muftis of the different madhahib say that therefore it is permissible. And this is the opinion that we follow. How would you recommend finding a spouse? Is there anything at ICCP that helps young people with this issue? Yes, well, we have our youth circles and gatherings that Imam Rafai, mashallah, has so effectively put together and runs. And it's not meant for matchmaking, of course, but it's meant for matchmaking. Right? This is where you're going to find like-minded people with same values and same principles. They're not issues of overtly matchmaking, but if you think about it, all of our things are matchmaking opportunities, I would say. So yes, alhamdulillah, we have that. As you know, at our mosque, we're a big family, and we love to socialize. And after the prayer, especially on Fridays, we're out, having a bite, having an ice cream, talking with one another. And these are the opportunities that I think that people can get to know one another. But specifically, the youth circles are what I suggest. And if you find somebody that's of interest, reach out to Imam al-Rafai or reach out to me, and then maybe we can help, kind of take things to the next 2 or 3 steps. And there's no shame in that. I mean, that's how it's going to happen, right? It's better that it happens that way than it happens other ways. So being a part of the community, coming to the events, hanging out, this is also very important. And we also, Sister Zamruda is reminding me that we also have a marriage connection link. Is this online, Sister Zamruda?
Yes, it's online.
So on the website, there's a link where only girls are registered, and that will, you can read about that on the website as a service that we provide. Okay, this is what I think is the last question. Can you explain the Islamic view of perfume for females outside of the house? So anything that a woman does outside of the house to overtly draw unnecessary attention to herself is something that is prohibited, whether it be in how she speaks, whether it be in how she dresses, whether it be in how she walks, so on and so forth. So the hadith about the woman going outside of the house with perfume is about that. It's not about that the woman needs to go out of the house smelling nasty, because that will have, as a matter of fact, the same effect, but just in a negative way. It will draw unnecessary attention. So it's about how the perfume is applied. That it's not applied too much, that it's applied to certain parts of the body, that it's sprayed and that she walks through it. Other things. I'm not a connoisseur of perfume, but I mean, there's a gazillion ways that can happen. But it's a way. It's a way to remind ourselves of our understanding and our interpretation and our application of modesty. So, I mean, that's how I would think about those traditions. Are there any other questions? Anybody want to ask anything else? Wow, mashallah, we have quite a few people today online. I think there might be more people now than were in the beginning, so I want to just take this opportunity again to apologize to everybody for the miscommunication last Friday. I take full responsibility for that miscommunication. I was traveling at the time. I was in a place where I was unable to log in. And I should have confirmed and double and triple confirmed with everyone that I was not going to be. So I apologize for people that came to the mosque, and I'm very sorry for people that signed online. I hope I didn't cause any inconvenience for anyone. But today's session and the next 2 Fridays, inshallah, will be online. I will be with you, even though it's 2:30 in the morning. There's nothing I'd like to do at 1 to 2 in the morning other than be with ICCP. So I'm happy to do that. I beg your forgiveness for that mishap. Oh, there are more questions.
Brother Tarek, this is Mohsen here. I need to apologize. We should express our apology to you for thank you so very much for your commitment. It's early morning, it's tahajjud for you, and not only your very important questions. Thank you, sir.
Alhamdulillah. Well, I mean, I was fast asleep, so I was just so upset when I woke up and I saw the text messages. Anyway, there's just 2 more questions. What should you ask someone before you get married? So I wrote a small article about this to celebrate my 20th anniversary with my wife, which I can't remember the title of the article, but I think it's something about celebrating 20 years of marriage. It's on my website. It's one of the more recent articles, so you can easily find that. I tried to enumerate what I think worked for us for these last 20 years. Of course, all of this is with Allah Ta'ala's permission and His tawfiq. But some of the things that I think that are important for you to understand is the Prophet ﷺ. There are 2 hadith that the Prophet ﷺ talked about, one addressed to women and one addressed to men in regards to marriage. When the Prophet ﷺ addressed his talk to men, and by the way, 2 or 3 Fridays ago, my khutbah was on this. So that's also on the ICCP website. Maybe that's easier. You should find that. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Tunkah al-mar'a li-arba'a," that a woman is married for 4 reasons. لِجَمَالِهَا, for her beauty. لِنَسَبِهَا, for her lineage. لِحَسَبِهَا, لِمَالِهَا, for her wealth. وَلِدِينِهَا, and for her deen. إِذْفَرْ بِذَاتِ الدِّينِ تَرِبَتْ يَدَاكَ, marry the person with deen and you will be successful. And he says almost the same thing, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to women. He said, whoever comes to you and you like his deen and his character, then marry him. So the issue is about deen. So the question is, well, what is that deen? What does deen mean? Is it means that the person prays 5 times a day and fasts Ramadan? Obviously, that's part of the deen, right? We have to do those things, but it's more than that. It's about somebody's set of first principles and character. So what you're looking for is you're looking for somebody who shares the same first principles as you, who shares the same values as you, because those values and those principles are what determine what decisions you make in life. So if God forbid something happens, a calamity or an important decision needs to be made, you will find yourselves more or less on the same page because you have the same values. You honor the same traditions. That's what's in addition to practicing them by practicing the faith. So the set of questions that you need to ask are those questions that will bring out in the answers what are those person's values and what are those person's morals and virtues, in addition to their character. So, if it's a woman that's looking or a man that's looking, you need to find somebody that has good character. Good characters that they're courteous. They're not whatever, all of the things that we know that person is a refined person of character, because you're going to have to live with this person, and therefore you have to be able to tolerate this person, and they need to tolerate you, you need to tolerate them. So character is important. So I find that a lot of the questions that people are asking are very material in nature. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What kind of job do you want? It's very quantitative. If we've learned anything from what we experienced the last 2 years of COVID, it should be that you can't map these things out. It just, things happen all the time. So where do I see myself in 5 years? Living in Beverly Hills, driving a Ferrari, but probably that's not going to happen because I'm not on, so those type of material questions for me indicate that people are looking for the wrong thing. They're looking for some kind of material guarantee in their marriage, and therefore they're approaching marriage as if it's like a business transaction or an investment of money. And many times they'll even use that type of, I met somebody once who said that a woman, he was talking to a girl for marriage and she was a lawyer. And she said that I make X amount of money per year. And if we're going to have children and I'm not going to, I have to stop working for like a year, let's say, for the childbirth and early months, rearing process, I need you to compensate the lost income that I'm going to lose by having this child. Which is, for a lawyer that's working at a decent firm, is a lot of money. That's the dumbest thing one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. It turns out they didn't get married, or it turns out, subhanAllah, that she lost her job subsequently, and for many, many years was jobless. So when you ask those kind of questions, or you think like that about marriage, you're going down the wrong path. That's not what's going to help you in your marriage. What's going to help you are the values and those first principles. And maybe we need to have a separate function just on the marriage thing. Maybe I can talk to Imam al-Rafai, and maybe at the end of the month or sometime before Thanksgiving, we can do something, because there's a lot more that I want to say, but now is not the forum for it. Can you recite the prayer aloud when we are alone? Well, if you're praying Allahu Akbar alone, it needs to be audible to you. Like Dhuhr, Asr, you need to be able to, you have to sound them out. It's not, you can't just sit there with your lips closed and you're reciting in your ear. You actually have to form the letters and let the sound come out, but just enough so that you can hear them. If it's Fajr, Maghrib, and Isha, you can be louder. Okay, and then this is the last question, last question. Can you ask if a man smokes, not to judge if they do, just because it isn't something that the woman does? Well, you will probably know if the person smokes or not. I think it becomes clear, but yes, you can ask, but I wouldn't use that as a make it or break it situation. Because I mean, I don't want to get too specific, but I mean, you know, are they like a casual smoker, or are they, you know, a chain smoker, or, you know, are they smoking 5 packs of cigarettes a day? Okay, that's a problem. Or do they smoke occasionally, like, you know, hookah or something like that? It's like a social type of thing. That's something else completely. So you have the right to ask. I mean, if you're going to get married, you have the right. That's the time that you have to ask those difficult questions. But I wouldn't lead with that question. I would lead with the type of first principles, value, deen-related questions I just mentioned earlier. Okay, I'm reminded that tonight we also want to make a special dua for Imam al-Rafai's aunt, who was on life support until yesterday, and her situation is very. I did not know about that, so if Imam al-Rafai is with us or not, or his wife or not, we're making dua for Imam al-Rafai's wife, aunt, sorry, and indeed Imam al-Rafai's entire family, who has been, you know, a stalwart colleague and friend, and a tremendous support for our growing ICCP family, and you know, much loved by all of us. So we're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tonight specifically to help his aunt in her time of need, and to be with Imam al-Rafai's entire family, inshallah. May Allah ta'ala protect them and continue to bestow his blessings upon them, inshallah. I believe this is the end of the session. Thank you for the questions. I hope I got to everything. I think there's one question I need to verify, the witted one. I will do that, inshallah, for the next time. And if I forget, please remind me. And having concluded, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from us this session. May we continue to learn and to grow together. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم صل أفضل صلاة على أسعد مخلوقاتك سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم عدد معلوماتك ومداد كلماتك كلما ذكرك الذاكرون وغفل عن ذكره الغافلون. Good night. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.